over a decade actually, and as well as the San Francisco Chronicle and Parade.com, and I've written a bunch of gardening books as well, and these are some of my books here. So, as mentioned, when I came back to Southern California, I had done a little bit of gardening on the East Coast when I was younger. So I did what I had always done, right? And I got a bunch of books on how do you garden, how do you vegetable garden, how do you fruit garden. Well, all the books kept talking about when it rains in the spring. And I think, okay, it doesn't look rainy out there, but it looks really windy and it's really hot right now. It's like 90 and it's March, and it's raining and it won't stop raining and things are flooding, etc. Right? So the SoCal Year-Round Gardening Series really had its genesis, started germinating many years ago when I found that there just wasn't enough information about how to grow here in Southern California, because it is a completely different climate than just about almost every area of the world, right? So you can't, and I will have a lot of people that will be from other areas, and they're mystified because they had these wonderful gardens in Illinois, right? But they can't figure out how to get this one plant to grow here in Southern California, because it is just so different. So it was about 4 or 5 years ago. So my daughter Sabrina, let me introduce her too now. So she grew up gardening. My grandson, so if you have either one of my books, he is in there gardening as well. And we haven't been, quote, forcing him to garden. He just has gone along, and now he's actually doing a bunch of his own experiments indoors on his own. He's 5 now. So as mentioned, my daughter Sabrina grew up in the garden, and she is a food scientist. So, and also an avid gardener as well. So when I had this idea for the series, we decided that it would be really good to put nutritional nuggets into each. So in my fruit book and in the vegetable book, we have a little bit of nutritional information on each of the different vegetables. And so when I talked to Sabrina about this, we agreed that there just wasn't enough information about, like I said, about how to do it here, right? So you don't want to read about what to do with such a plant in the winter when the snow is up to here. I mean, obviously this year's a little different, but that's more of a emergency situation, but just what to do on a regular basis. And as mentioned, when the spring rains that we, let's face it, rarely ever get, and if we do, it's too much, right? It's either not enough or too much, etc. So the vegetable gardening book came out 2 years ago. The fruit gardening book came out last year. We're currently working on getting the herb gardening book will be out this year. Next year is flower gardening, and then the following year, one who's gardening in Southern California. So what we're going to talk about today, because this is the tomato festival, is the Solanaceae, a family of crops and growing them. However, I'm more than happy to answer, we'll open up for questioning before we're done too, and I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions about other garden related questions for your gardens. And we'll be doing the raffle for the book as well. So if someone hasn't filled it out, go ahead and do that. Maybe they're
trying to pass it.
Good.
Thank you.
So we do have a really good climate for tomatoes, obviously, right? And also the other Solanaceae family of plants. Those being potatoes, tomatillos, peppers, and also ground cherries. If you've heard of ground cherries, we actually have those in the fruit book here. Those are very cool. They actually look like, when they grow, they look like tomatillos because they have a papery husk and you open them, and the difference is rather than having more of the tomatillo in there, you have a little ground cherry in there. And I think, do we have, yeah,
He's my fruit lover, so ground cherries. You like those, huh?
Yeah, so here you go. So this is what they look like. They're really cool. And they're very easy to grow. And like the other tomato crops, the Solanaceae crops, they grow really well. And they're very sweet, which is cool. You can get a picture?
Are they selling them here today?
I'm sorry?
Are they selling them here today?
No. Ground cherries.
No, but maybe they will.
Yeah, they're easy to grow.
Yeah, they're very easy to grow. So those are very fun. This family of plants, tomatoes can take a little more cooler temperatures, but things like the peppers and the tomatillos and the ground cherries all really like it really, really warm. Potatoes are also in the category as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these categories, and then if you would like to ask questions during, that's fine. Providing it's about what I'm talking about. If not, yeah. So your dahlias, I can answer that, or your etc. Those questions afterwards. But that's fine if you want to do that. So the tomatoes, and I know that the next person that is going to be speaking will be talking a lot about tomatoes. So as mentioned, I'm going to talk about this category of plants in general. But tomatoes, some little tips and tricks of some things that are helpful. One of the things, obviously we're not talking about this right now in terms of our weather, but you may know that when it gets really, really hot, over 90 degrees or higher, they won't set fruit. And then they won't. So it seems kind of counterproductive, right? It's nice and hot finally. Your basil's doing really well. You're ready for your tomatoes, and you're going to have your bruschetta for your neighbors that are coming over, your friends, and your tomatoes aren't doing it because it's been too hot. So once again, with our extreme weathers, right? Well, there's actually a blossom spray that you can actually spray on the blossoms to get them to set fruit even when it's hotter. So that's one thing that's in the book, and there's other things like that in the book as well. So just little things too, and as you can imagine, in a lot of areas of the country, that's not really a problem, right? They're not, generally speaking. I mean, not talking Arizona, but a lot of other areas of the country, they're just trying to get it warm enough for them to even set fruit, right? And here we're worried that it's too hot. So there are some workarounds when you know what you're doing with gardening in Southern California that then you can have a really prolific crop, right? So another thing to keep in mind with the tomatoes and even a lot of your vegetable plants, and that is that you a lot of times may very well need some shade in the afternoon, especially if you have a spot that just gets the sun beating down on the area all day long. Now, some plants are fine with that. Tomatoes generally are, but you may even find with your tomatoes that the leaves are getting sunburned. Or one thing you definitely want to do is not, and people will do this when their tomatoes get very rangy and things are growing all over the place, they'll cut back the foliage. But what happens is then you expose the fruit to sun scald. So if you have that, you have a really hot day, and then you're looking at your tomatoes, and they have like sometimes it's a gray cast, sometimes it's a brown cast. That's usually kind of sun scald. Of course, obviously, these are things that, it's not going to be the end of the world, right? You just cut that part off and you eat it. But just to, if you want to protect the plants, that's one thing to keep in mind. If you get plants, hopefully you'll get some tomato plants today. When you get them, keep in mind that it's going to take them a little while to get going just because it isn't warmer. It isn't as warm as it has been as some years, and etc. But the roots will be growing. So that's the good news. You'll have a lot of root growth. And then when we do start to get the warmer warmer days, they will start to really sprout up and really start to look like, oh good, we're getting somewhere here. Now we can flower. So that's something to keep in mind. And if you have planted tomatoes before, you've probably heard about planting them fairly deep, so that the little stem nodes along, which are also leaf nodes along. So you take off a leaf and you have that little bump in the tomato. You plant them deep, you're going to get a stronger root system. The stronger root system is really good too because it will keep the plant going longer. You can, as you've probably done with tomatoes. Tomatoes are one of the most popular plants, right? For good reason. You can get them to grow. A lot. There are the indeterminate ones are perennials, so you can get them to grow for months on end. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then they will reseed too. So the reseeding can be interesting, however. If it's an open pollinated plant, meaning that the seeds will, when you plant it, the seeds come true to what the plant is, you'll have the same tomatoes. If it's a hybrid, however, you'll have some interesting results. The reason is you have the mother plant that has two different parents. Okay, so you don't know what you're going to get when you get that seed. You could get the one of the parents, or you could get a strange combination of the two. My strangest one was this beautiful tomato that actually tasted, not that I go around tasting oil, but it tasted like oil. It tasted petroleum, like petroleum or something. It was really weird. And so it was not even something that you could hide with, garlic. I mean, it just was really, really strange. So just to keep that in mind too, if you know what the parents were and they were open pollinated, then, and I know today they have a lot of ones that are heirlooms. The heirloom tomatoes are generally open pollinated, so you don't have to worry about that. You can get the same plant over and over again, but not with the hybrids. Okay, so Sabrina, do you want to say something about tomatoes before we move on to the next thing?
Just that I got some very fun cherry tomatoes reseeding when I was pregnant with my daughter. Couldn't go out in the garden and as much, and got a lot of really fun winter tomatoes, cherry tomatoes that reseeded. So that was fun. But the fun tidbit about tomatoes I wanted to share, speaking of oil, is if you pair your tomatoes with olive oil, like say you're making a salad with basil and mozzarella and tomato, if you add olive oil, it helps you digest or get more of the lycopene in tomatoes, which is a great antioxidant. So I always add, even if I'm just making a little sauce or adding tomatoes onto things, I add just a little drizzle of olive oil on, and you get even more nutrients. So fun fact of the day. Yeah.
I have a question about the note about planting. You said with these guys that we just bought today, they'll develop their roots if we plant them around this time, but do you recommend waiting a week? Is it still too cold? Just given all this rain?
If they're not really outgrowing their pot and they look comfortable in the pot, I would wait a little bit. Yeah. The ground is still cold. We're just now we're going to be starting very soon when spring hits, which is March something 20th, I think. That's when we start going towards we start going towards the longer days, and that's when the soil starts to heat up. So even though it may still be yicky out, or let's say yicky, but cold out, you wait. Yeah. And so it's not going to hurt to grow them in the container. Tomatoes are really pretty easy to grow. They're actually a tropical vine. So, and in their native habitats, they grow way up in the trees and just keep going. So, so they'll be fine.
I have a lot that I started at home, and I don't know if they just I don't know why, but they grew really fast. And now they've outgrown their pots a little bit. And I'm wondering if I should just cut my losses and not put them in the ground or just try it anyway and see
Oh,
what
well, the good,
happens?
okay, so I'm glad you asked that question. So the question, and I should have repeated the other question too, is it okay to, she's got a tomato plant here, is it okay to put it in the ground now? Could you wait? So that I did answer that one. And then the next one is that she had grown some indoors and they grew really fast. And a lot of times when you're growing vegetables really indoors, if the light isn't really, really good, you're going to get leggy plants. So they grow quickly because they grow towards light, right?
Yeah.
And they're seeking that light. So what you want to do when you're doing this in the future is to get a grow light system where you're got within 2 to 3 inches above the seedlings, and then you're going to get really strong growth. However, the good news is that because tomatoes are that tropical vine I was talking about, a lot of times they'll be a little more behind in their growth than they would be if you had put them under really strong lighting. But they will come out. They will eventually grow really well for you. So they're definitely. So what I would do with them is put them into a bigger pot for now, because you have been growing them indoors. You're going to need to harden them off. And are you familiar with hardening them off? Okay. So, and for anyone who isn't, hardening off refers to acclimating, it's a kind of a weird term, acclimating the plants to the outdoors. So what you do first is you put them out for a couple hours. And you also want to watch the sun when you're doing this. So you want to keep them in a shaded area so that they're not going to get too much sun at first, because remember, they've been in your house searching for light. So, you know, of course, you would think like the solution is give them lots of sun, but that's where you get the sun scald, and also it could shock them. So you put them in the shade for 2 hours and bring them in, and then you go to put them out again the next day for 4 or 5 hours and bring them in, and then so it's basically like training them, and then eventually they spend the night outdoors. So usually it's like a 5-day process that you do that, and then when you do that. After you do that, when being in the container, do that when they're in the containers, then you can go ahead and plant them. And with those really rangy ones, you want to plant them real deep. So you're basically going to get it. Yeah. Yeah. So we have actually a picture in the vegetable garden book. So how to plant. So basically, you're going to use all that rangy growth as to your advantage. So, anyone else have any other questions about tomatoes before we move on to, yes?
I get so frustrated. Everyone claims how sun gold is so great tasting. I have planted it in 2 different spots, one a big pot, another one in a raised bed. They don't taste good. Everyone claims they're the best tasting, and for me, and I grow other tomatoes, why?
Okay, so the question she's asking about sun gold and being really good tasting, and then hers aren't as well, don't taste as well as everyone else is saying. Well, of course, tastes do differ. However, now I'm curious, how do your other tomatoes do, and what sort of tomatoes are you growing?
Fine, I grow 4th of July. I grow that Mr. Stripey, Berkeley, that weird color thing. I experiment with different ones every year, but I've done sun gold twice. And
not without good luck, yeah. So the sun gold, I've had some really good years with sun gold, and some years where it's like, these are okay, they'll do, etc. And that actually is the case with tomatoes in general. You have those years where they're so good, and then other years, like what's exactly? Well, a lot of it has to do with our temperature and temperature variations. They actually do best in the 70s and 80s. So 75 even to 85, even 80. They don't actually 80, more like 75 to 80. So when we get those sweet spot days while they're starting to ripen, that's when you get those really, really nice tasting tomatoes. So that's why you can even in February, I remember so there's been several Februarys, because we usually get, generally, not this year, which was good that we got the rain, but a lot of times it'll be sunny and pretty, and it's February, and those are the times when you call people back east and talk, I'm just out in the sun, I think I'd like to get a little tan, but oh, you're digging your snow, let you go back to it, but not this year, but, so that's what'll happen we get, if you think about it, we'll have like 70, 75 degrees during those times, and that's why you have those really nice tasting tomatoes. Because what's happening with those temperatures extremes is that the fruit tries to ripen and get done quicker. So it doesn't have as much time to store all those sugars. Because what we're looking for in those really, really tasty tomatoes is the sugars. And so that's why. So I would potentially give it another try. And if you want to. But there are a lot of other really nice cherry tomatoes as well. And there's really I'm trying to think of the names. I don't know if we have them in the book, but there's some ones that are teeny weeny, like little teeny weeny ones. Now, the cool thing about those little teeny weeny ones, and generally the case with the cherries, right, is that those sugars are able to really get concentrated in there. So I would try some other, because I actually, what you're talking about, I actually have had some other cherries that I like better than Sun Gold.
Well, yeah, my other cherry tomatoes taste like they're supposed to, but the Sun Gold is just like, what on earth am I doing?
And I believe that Sun Gold is a hybrid. Yes, it is a hybrid. So when we get into this with hybrids, you don't always even get the same plant, the same fruit from a hybrid, because they need to, as mentioned, you can't get a tomato true, right, from the same tomato, right? So they need to keep the hybridizing in order to get these hybrid varieties, right? So they're constantly reinventing the wheel, or whatever you want to say, reinventing the fruit, and that's why you get some variation as well. So that is the fun thing about the heirlooms, is you're going to be growing something that somebody grew 30 years ago is the same taste. The super sweet 100, yeah, I've grown that, and there was some other ones I can't remember, but there was one that's like it has like a fairy kind of name, elfin. I don't know, it's not elfin, but it's like a little I can't remember it right now. I'm sure I'll remember it after I'm done, right? I think that answers your question. Yeah.
Non-GMO mean the same thing as heirloom?
This is her. Let her talk about that as the food scientist.
So, no, hybridization is heirloom is the same seed that's always been. So there's been no changes. It's been grown for years and years and years. A hybrid is just a crossover of two different parent seeds, basically. So there's been no modification to like the genetic material or anything. It's just a crossover of the two to get certain characteristics. Like, say one grows really well in a certain environment and it's resistant to certain pests and things, and then this other one tastes really good, and they're able to cross over the two, and then you get qualities of each. But there's no modification of the genes or anything, so it's not GMO.
But you want to talk about GMO? Are you curious about GMO?
Yeah. Well, yeah, with the non-GMO, so non-genetically modified. So does that still mean it's hybrid or not hybrid?
Oh,
right.
So they're separate categories, basically. So there's only, and it's not something you can buy. There's I think a very rare one type of GMO tomato, but no one's really growing it. So everywhere you go, when you buy tomatoes, you're not getting GMO tomatoes. They're super rare seeds that they've been trying to figure out over the years to get certain things certain ways. But because hybrid tomatoes grow so well, there's never been a need for a scientist, to create a certain thing. So yeah, so you have heirlooms and hybrids, but neither of them are GMO.
What about the commercially grown tomatoes? Are they GMO?
I think there is one type, but not typically the ones that are grown.
They're very expensive seeds.
Yeah, they're not very common.
Expensive.
And for that reason, corn and soy and canola, those are grown traditionally GMO, but because there isn't things like hybrid tomatoes are so easy to grow and have different characteristics that we want already, that there's really never been a need to make, from the commercial side of things, a bunch of GMO tomatoes. So the majority of, basically 99.9% probably of the tomatoes grown that you're eating are GMO.
So, and people do get concerned because they do confuse hybrid with GMO, and then but it's completely different. So that, and I think we do talk about that in the book as well too, in the vegetable gardening book. So yeah, you don't need to be worried that. Of course, you will see on seed packets non-GMO, but that's just a marketing thing, right? So like the thing like natural, the different phrases they can put legally that make you feel better. Yes.
The issue is also the use of the word organic. So if something is organic, it's by definition non-GMO.
Yeah.
But a lot of products market themselves as non-GMO and organic, which is redundant. But if an item is non-GMO, it does not mean that pesticides are not used on that product.
Yeah.
You can spray anything you want on non-GMO. You can't on organic.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure if this is a disease issue or what, but for the last 5 years, I've planted in pots, I've grown in buckets, in the ground, all areas of my yard, front yard, and I can grow them from seed or the ones that are already grown. And I put them in the ground, and when I do them in the bucket, it's all brand new soil with buttons new and everything. The plant will grow nice and beautiful, like 4 feet tall, big, healthy beans, and start flowering and start growing tomatoes. And then slowly they'll start getting these start falling off the leaves and branches and so forth. And so they have these like cucumbers, and I'm out of like ideas on what to try because the neighbor blocks away from there with their tomatoes grow purple. And I used to be able to grow in my other houses sticking anywhere I was able to grow. And so I'm not sure if there's something in my yard or what. I've tried organic sprays and doing stuff on them, and it doesn't slow down whatever the seeds going.
So I think if you're saying this is growing in containers.
No, containers and every possible area.
So you're trying every different method.
Ground and pot, raised bed. It's really frustrating because I know tomatoes are super easy to grow, and I've grown for years now.
And what are the symptoms again? I didn't catch what happens.
So after the plant is grown, like 4 feet tall and big and lush and dark green and everything and growing fruit, they'll start getting that disease. They'll start turning the leaves yellow. And it's not from overwatering. They just start turning yellow and they turn brown right away. And then it'll do a full branch, and then they'll start doing flying through the plants.
And there are fungal pathogens that are airborne, but it is unusual that it would keep happening, especially if so he's asking about diseases that keep setting on, and this is on your tomatoes and cucumbers as well.
Yeah, so
and
like
those
the
are,
last 5 years, I've tried different methods this whole time. Before I moved to Worcester, I made a crazy even if I didn't care for it, they were good.
so my suggestion for this would be to get some of the foliage and to get a diagnosis on what the pathogen, what it is that's attacking them, and get a good representation. I know Chris here is pretty good at I don't know if you brought him anything, but he could.
I'm just starting over again, so I don't have any.
Well, so let's fingers crossed it doesn't happen, but if it does, bring the leaves to him. He can help diagnose what it is. So because the thing is, it's similar to plants are a lot like people, right? Actually, they've shown that we genetically are a lot like plants, and it's the same thing as if you're sick and you are taking different antibiotics, but they're not the right one, right? So it's that the things you've tried may not have helped, but it does because you changed the soil. It's something that's airborne, but there are a lot of fungal pathogens that are airborne. So that would be my suggestion. Yes, and that's another thing. There are many varieties that are much more disease tolerant. So you see for instance, on tomatoes, the tags with V, the V that's for resistance to verticillium wilt, and then there's F for Fusarium wilt. And the thing about all of those, as I mentioned, those different pathogens, is that there's so many of them. You know, there's leaf spot disease, there's septoria, there's etc. So so yes, getting plants that are more resistant to a lot of those things is a good thing too. It's interesting to me that the cucumbers are involved. The cucumbers are in a different family of plants.
Right.
Yeah. However, they are susceptible to certain different fungal pathogens as well. So you've kind of done the broad, let's try everything thing. So now trying to focus in on, okay, what the heck is this? And it could be that a neighbor has a plant that is susceptible to it, and then it's getting to your stuff. Yeah.
Where else besides Chris here could one go and get diagnosed?
I know there is a laboratory. It's for soil. I may have it in. I think I do have it in the book, but it's based in Orange, and they do soil analysis because you can teach your soil, because even though it's getting in, it's coming from soil most likely. I can't remember the name, but you could always I could always get it to you if you want to email me. I can give you the name. It's a very common. It's not, but it is a soil. I know people will send away to other states, and I'll say, well, there's one like right down the street. It makes more sense, right, than sending it somewhere else. Yes.
You can also contact UCLA in different places that have.
Yes, that's a good idea. That's a good. So she was mentioning UCLA, but also actually the Orange County Master Gardeners have a helpline, and they're very helpful as well. So that is another opportunity too. And if anyone has any of these things these resources that I don't have right now, feel free to email me, and you'll get a welcome email with your if you signed up for my newsletter, and you can just reply to it and ask me these questions as well. But it's kind of like Orange Plant Pathology Laboratories or something like that. Okay, so
And going back to the one, there is on page 9 of the vegetable book, we have that picture from earlier of how to plant when you have a leggy plant. Yeah, I can pass it around. Probably pass it to the other one. But basically, it's showing you if it's like, say you have a bent plant, and especially if you're growing it from home and you know it gets really tall, you can take the bottom leaves off of the plant, and you get those nodules where the leaves were, and you can dig pretty deep and then make sure those nodules where the leaves were are underground, and then you'll get roots growing from where those leaves once were, and it helps it so it's not blowing in the wind, and helps it grow stronger. And I've had bent ones, and you can even plant it kind of sideways so that the long bent part of the stem goes underneath, and then you have a strong tomato plant up above. So that's been super helpful for me from growing them from seed. I get that happening a lot, so definitely.
There's auxins, there's growth hormones in those where the stems were. So there are stem nodes and root nodes. They do both. So that's why when those you take off the leaf, it stimulates those auxins, and then you put it in the soil, and then the roots start to grow. So that's why you need those bumps. So if you just have clear stem with none of that on there, that's not going to do anything. Okay, so I think we can talk about peppers. So peppers are another tomato family of plants. People love to grow peppers. Peppers you definitely you want to wait on them, getting them. They like it warm. They prefer 70 to 85 degrees. And then the chili peppers even hotter than that. Actually, at night for the regular peppers, 60 to 75, but hotter for the hot peppers to get them in. So we're talking really April, mid to late April for the peppers. A lot of times it depends on the plant. So this is why it's really important to know your plants, right? Because some things like the tomatoes, they will set down roots. But with peppers, they'll be like, I don't like this. It's way too cold. I'm not going to grow roots. I'm not going to grow anything, and I'm going to probably not do well for you, right? So And peppers are one of those things that take a really long time to come back from a non-ideal growing condition. So if they started out real slow, they're going to be pokey for the rest of the season. So those definitely don't want to get in until it's warm out, and it's staying warm out as well. There's lots of really nice peppers you can grow too, and I know they carry peppers here. You carry peppers here when it gets a little warmer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're going to grow them from seed, they're very slow from seed. So if you want to try that, you want to do it immediately indoors. Lots of light right on top of the plant, and make sure it's full spectrum. Full spectrum. And even if you get grow lights, make sure that they're full spectrum. Full spectrum mimics daylight. And that's why it's important, because it has the different colors that the sun has. And even when you're putting the seeds in with a lot of seeds, some seeds it's okay to do it when you don't have the light on yet, but other seeds you do need light on them. So unless you know for sure, just put them under the light right away so that when they start to pop up, they're strong. But the peppers, however, taste really, really good when you grow them yourself as well. But you can always get growing peppers and plants too. Anyone want to say something?
Yeah, the fun fact about peppers, and I was learning about those, is they all have lots of vitamins and everything, like vitamin C, vitamin A. But I was trying to figure out, especially because it's one of his favorite foods, which one has the most vitamins and antioxidants and nutrients. It's the red peppers, because they're on the plant the longest, and so they can get the most accumulation of vitamins and antioxidants and things like that. So of all of them on the range of the spectrum, green being the least and red being the most, and they're all really great for you and have fiber and minerals and vitamins and all of that, but vitamins are highest in the red ones.
Do you know if that would be true for the commercially sold red peppers, or were they just picked when they were green and, made red?
That's a good question. They have, yeah, so the question is that true of commercial peppers? A lot of times they're picked greener and then they'll ripen more.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's still true to an extent, because they have to develop the color is actually showing antioxidants and things that are in the pepper. So a green pepper won't have the same antioxidants that a red pepper has, because it just doesn't have those antioxidants present. So it does have more than a green pepper would.
However, you do bring up a good point. In one of the benefits of growing your own produce is it's a lot like that whole thing. Oh, wait a second. A lot like the whole thing about when you drive your car off the lot, it loses value at the first stoplight, right? So it's the same thing with harvesting your produce. And that's the problem with the long treks.
I was going to say too, like this is the driving your car off the lot analogy, vitamins especially are susceptible to loss over moisture and light and time. Minerals less so, but vitamin C is really, it dissipates a lot faster than other vitamins. So you get it the most immediately after cutting it off the plant, and then over time it loses it. So definitely best right off the plant.
So out in your garden as you're foraging, having lunch, eating it right off rinsing it with the hose and eating it right off the vine is you're going to get the most bang for your buck, or whatever you want to talk about, or for all your hard work. You're going to get the most vitamins and minerals, especially the vitamins that she mentioned, right then and there. So even when you're serving, say you're going to be serving a salad that night, the longer you can wait to harvest that, the better for the vitamin and minerals. Yeah, and it's fun too to go out right before you eat to pick.
Pick and sample.
Yes, sampling. Yes, exactly. So if you don't make it inside without anything, you can pat yourself on the back, knowing that you're really, really healthy now because you got all the vitamins and minerals that out of it.
You need a lot of greens.
Yeah.
A lot of greens and sauteing with a little garlic and
That's good.
onion, olive oil.
Yeah.
Greens especially, like if you've grown lettuces, you'll see that when you take the lettuce off the plant, it like oozes liquid, and that's like all the vitamins and everything in lettuce. Like when you buy lettuce at the store and it's so dried out, you're really not getting much besides like some fiber and water. But right off the plant, you're getting a ton of things because it's so high in moisture and oozes a lot faster.
Yes. So the fiber from the store, but the vitamins and minerals from your garden. So really, really good reasons to grow your own. And one thing to keep in mind too with growing your own is that
somebody walked off.
they don't have to look perfect. And that is the nice thing about some of the companies out there now, the imperfect produce, etc., that sort of thing. Because really, I mean, you can talk about this more, but and you talk to a farmer, they're getting rid of half of crops because, as you know, as farmers, as your own backyard farmer, right? You go out. This apple doesn't look like that perfect perfect apple. It doesn't make a difference in the how good it is going to be for you, and even how tasty it is, right? We've been trained by these this perfect apple, this perfect banana, this perfect this perfect that, and then it's not even feasible. Realistic.
Sometimes smaller, a lot of times they're too small to meet a certain diameter or minimum that the grocery store needs, and so they're then like tossed or got rid of or donated or whatever. But sometimes the smaller, the more nutrients and things that are packed into the small fruit. Once it gets huge, it might just be more moisture and stuff than fiber than nutrients. So
another good thing to keep in mind. And I have to say, as a backyard grower, I have a lot of respect for farmers because you think like they've got to be out there talking to the tree. You've got to get bigger. I can't sell you till you get bigger. No, you're not shiny enough. You're not this enough. You're not that enough. Yeah, and with the weather and the this and the that, I mean, we're lucky. We get the food that we do, right? But I bring that other point up is just eat the fruit. Just eat it. Eat the vegetables. Eat the fruit. A lot of times you can just cut it up and prepare it and eat the same anyway, right? And it's also a good educational thing for someone who may be coming over and saying, "Oh, well, I thought is that apple okay?" Because that sort of thing, and explain. Now you can explain. Yes, it's actually more nutritious than the one you got at the store the other day.
Can you talk a little bit about companion planting with tomatoes? I've grown tomatoes and I always plant basil near them and they're happy with each other. But I've read that other plants such as peppers and garlic planted near tomatoes will help deter certain insects or other pests.
Yeah, so there's a lot. There's been a lot of and actually I think we have that.
yeah.
There's been a lot of research on the companion planting. So he's asked about companion planting with tomatoes, and also in general companion planting. And what companion planting is referring to is planting other friends for your plants to help them do better, to help them perform better, produce better, and also to deter pests and diseases and things like that. So there are really good combinations. A lot of times, one of the reasons for basil being a good for the tomatoes is the fact that it will flower and then it attracts pollinators. So that's one big reason. It will also attract things like beneficial wasps that will then take care of some of your pests, right? So those are some things that you can consider. And then another thing that so in terms of marigolds, they've done a lot of work on marigolds. So marigolds, they will deter pests, and they also will even deter the beneficial benefit. They will take care of the bad nematodes in the soil. So nematodes are little microscopic worms that will eat roots, and so the marigolds will deter. They've done studies where there's areas where they planted marigolds where there are no bad nematodes. There's good nematodes too. So there's good nematodes that eat the bad nematodes, but then you can plant the marigolds, and that will help with that. So it will help your soil as well. I had another thought.
I was gonna say on the marigolds too, another tip we put in there is rather than just pulling when it's done flowering, it's dying off, you can actually, at the end of the season, till it back into the soil, and all the beneficial benefits that it has, like the bad nematodes, is it'll keep working underground in the soil. So just till it right back into the soil when it's done. I was gonna say regarding that, what not to do
this is where it is good to know what companions do well, right? So the strawberries, you don't want to plant strawberries near any of the Solanaceae family, because the strawberries can get diseases that the tomato family carry and are susceptible to. So that's another thing. So there is a lot to the companion planting. So looking them up when you can, and however, as mentioned, anything that's flowering generally, and you see bees coming to it, even butterflies, that's going to help your other plants.
Like rosemary, lavender, all of those are great for deterring the bad pests and bringing in good ones like bees.
And basil is also another tropical plant. So looking at the types of plants. So basil takes moisture like tomatoes do, but tomatoes you want to let dry out a little bit more. Basil is okay if you do that, but make sure when you do the companion planting that they need the same amount of water and that sort of thing. Another thing that to keep in mind too is there are certain crops, companion crops, that will attract pests and diseases. So basically, you choose a plant that is really susceptible to a certain disease or pathogen, and put that near your plants that you're trying to grow well. So you're kind of doing sacrificial crops as well. That's another thing that you can do too.
What about squirrels and rats?
Are not best friends.
Smart rats. They just about right.
Yeah, so the squirrels and rats, those are the biggest those are probably the biggest pest problem, right, of all of them. So you really just have to work outsmarting them all the time. So, when you started having a lot of a problem, putting up chicken wire around plants, if you're growing in a container, that really drives them crazy. If you put a chicken wire cage on it, right?
They'll dig underneath.
Sometimes, but remember, there is a lot of other dining opportunities, right? So where your neighbors aren't doing these things. So it does depend. However, a lot of times they're lazy too.
Yeah.
So if it's like, oh geez, I'm not doing that. Let's go to the restaurant down the street because that's open. I don't have to deal with this, right? So anything you can do to
I don't have my yard particularly with squirrels, and I set up the bird feeder and all these treats and things purposely on the other side of my yard from all my planters, and they've torn up the rug over on that side of the yard, but they've tended to have a field day with the birds and the bird feeder and the treats and all the craziness on my plumeria trees on that side of the yard, and then left my planters and garden stuff on the right side of the yard totally alone because they're having so much fun on the other side of the yard. So
I did that with grass last year. It was gruesome, and it wasn't intentional, but I had a bunch of tomatoes that were overripe, and so I wasn't going to eat them. And I just put them into a container, which I put on a table away from my plants. And I kept thinking, I got to throw that away. But then I would notice it kept diminishing in size, and I realized it was rats. So I bought a bunch of rat traps from here, and I tucked them in. It was gruesome.
Oh, gosh.
I was getting 2 or 3 dead rats a day. It was horrible. But they ate those tomatoes, and
Last
they
year,
stopped
yeah.
going for the plants. Because it was so easy. They just climbed up and they ate.
So it's kind of a strategic thing.
I had 2 methods that have worked for me, and I've had rat
Great.
problems for many years. My friend Wayne can attest to video evidence of these, but one technique that works really well, and you have to take a little time to take a cheap wooden rat trap, and actually I glue peanuts to the bait area with a balloon there, and top it with a little peanut butter. So the rat goes to nibble on the peanuts, and the peanut doesn't come away so easy, so you have to tug. The second technique is it was poison. I read about on the internet, and it works. I mix 50-50 Jiffy corn muffin mix with baking soda, 50-50, in a little plastic cup. Put it in a bait station so the dogs can't eat it. The rats eat it because they're attracted by the mix with the cornbread, and when it gets to their stomach, the stomach acid creates a massive gas bubble. Rats can't work or fart, so they have a little explosion, and I've had great success with those. And
Do you find the dead rats?
yeah, from eating that mixture,
So-
I find them a little bit freaky.
Depends on if you want to do that or not.
Okay, so it just depends on how many you want. However, one thing too I wanted to bring up in terms of the rats and feeding birds, the millet, birds love millet. It's a very small seed. The rats want nothing to do with it. So because a lot of times, like sunflower seeds, that sort of thing, it will attract the rats. So if that's another thing. What I do is lots of millet, and the birds come and they don't touch my blueberries and things like that because they love the millet. And then also mealworms, but in less of a quantity as the millet. And the rats aren't as interested in the mealworms, and they're definitely not interested in the millet because it's so small. That's just that would be like us eating dust or something.
Yeah.
Let me get this question.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I had a really big problem with something coming in the night and digging my plants up, and I just put plastic garden forks in the bed with the tines sticking up, buried under the mulch or whatever it was. They would come by and step on those forks, and they weren't coming back anymore.
Yeah.
It was that simple. And
So she was talking about putting
Yeah.
plastic forks
Yeah.
in her garden bed, and that will deter them. So really, you just need to outsmart them. And if you've ever looked a rat in the eye and a squirrel, you know they're like, I'm gonna get, I'm figuring this out. No, I'm figuring this out. And I've told them, especially the squirrels, we're gonna work on it. Oh, another thing about the squirrels, really important. If you've seen your squirrels, if they're eating like your foliage and leaves and stuff, I figured it out just last year. It's because they're thirsty. So if you can put out some sort of a thing that they can drink out, they don't like to go on the ground because they're at risk at the ground. I have actually it's a little girl statue, and she's sitting next to a little bowl. I fill that bowl, and it's on my fence. So when they're running along, they drink the water and they go. So as long as I keep that with that just a little bit of water, and you're refilling it, right? They stop tearing things up that way too. Because a lot of times they're just rats or whatever, but the squirrels especially, they're looking for the water, right? So, and they're trying to tell you that by eating your leaves. Okay, I think what I need to do now is do the drawing. Did everyone fill this out because I know we're running out of time here. So I know there's another